Yes, you read that right. I did not read 100 books in 2024. And you might be wondering why this piece of information is significant. But I promise I have a point to make, and I'm going to make it. Over the past years, there have been many versions of this conversation online where people judge or question the validity of claims by readers who say they have read 100 books, sometimes 200 books in a year. I have this theory that because people are aware of this collective brain rot that we are all experiencing in the society, there's this fascination with people who claim to read this large number of books in a year. And so this fascination manifests as jealousy, because somehow they did not join this group of people to fight that collective brain rot by also reading over 100 books in a year. And of course, this jealousy manifests as, oh, I actually don't think you read 100 books in a year. You probably were just skimming through the books. You probably did not pick up anything while reading the books. This creates a larger issue because there are people that are fighting this collective brain rot or attention problem that we have by reading books, and they just don't end up reading 100 books in a year. If we continue to feed into this jealousy where you only subconsciously think that people that read over 100 books are the people that are fighting their brain rot, then it stops you from also doing the little you can over the year to fight for your attention span. So if people begin to think of it this way, maybe we'll see less of this frankly stupid conversations that people engage in at the end of the year. Anyway, to avoid turning this video into an essay, and also because I refuse to engage in this conversation anymore, I will now share my top 10 books that I read in 2024. So I am starting off very hot with The Muslimah Sex Manual, a Halal Guide to Mind-Blowing Sex by Muladhat. I decided to read this book when I stumbled on it on Everhand while looking through, like just randomly. And as a sex-positive Muslim woman, it was nice to see a book written by another practicing Muslim woman that does not hold back on things. This book covers everything from sex mate to birth control to what to say during sex to foreplay to sexting. Think of everything and everything possible. You'll probably find a chapter on it. This book is one that I think every Muslim woman should read at least once in their life, whether or not they are planning to get married. Number 9 on my list is The Number One Ladies Detective Agency by Alexandra McCall Smith. And this is a dramatization, well, 2-part dramatization of the popular series The Number One Ladies Detective Agency, also by the same author. It is set in Botswana and it follows 2 women, Ma Ramotswe, who is the detective, and Mama Kutsi, who is the assistant, basically, but she helps Ma Ramotswe to solve her cases. So basically, we just follow them solving cases and just living their daily lives. So each of the volume contains 8 episodes, and it basically is just each episode following Ma Ramotswe. I can never pronounce her name. Ma Ramotswe solving a different case. I really liked this book because it reminds me of like growing up and listening to older people just like tell you random folklores and just stories when you have like crickets and frogs in the background at night, that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed listening to them. So number 8 on the list is Shoko Smile by Choi, Eunyoung, and it is translated by Sunguru or you, I'm not really sure. But this is a collection of short stories, and the collection contains 7 short stories that was translated from the Korean into English. This book represents 3 things that I love immensely: short stories, translated fiction, and women's friendship. These are things that I really love individually, and so it combines all of them together. Every story reminded me of how beautifully and differently one can love in different contexts, because people show up differently in different relationships. It also reminds me of how heavy grief can be when you depart from or lose touch with or lose your loved ones. You can lose your loved ones to death, you can lose them to distance, you can lose them to like different phases in life. And so each of the stories, the way they remind me of how differently you can love, also remind me of how differently you can lose love and how differently you can grieve them. So yeah, I really enjoyed this short story collection, and that is why it is number 8 on my list. As the title suggests, this is a love story between two Muslim characters, Faiza and Ahmed, and it is romance that is not exactly halal. So for context, romantic relationships outside of marriage or the premise of marriage is forbidden in Islam. It's part of the like major sins in Islam. And for more context, zina is basically just romantic relationship outside of marriage. I love this book for many reasons, and one of them is the fact that it is such a realistic portrayal of a Muslim girl trying to fall in love while not wanting to fall into zina. I also like it because it is a brilliant portrayal of how our societies, Muslim societies, raise Muslim girls only to see zina for the major sin that it is, and don't put the same effort into raising Muslim boys. So when these two people become adults and have to interact with one another when trying to get married or whatever, there's always going to be such a complexity because they are both coming from different directions, right? When it comes to zina. Really enjoyed this book. It's very good portrayal of romantic context in Islamic society. I also swooned a bit. Not a bit, I swooned a lot. My 6th favorite book of 2024 is Kim Jiyoung, born 1982 by Choi Nam-joo, translated by Chang. So this is another translated fiction. This book was also adapted into a movie, which I watched immediately after reading the book. Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, basically follows a woman called Kim Jiyoung, and we follow her experiences from conception up until adulthood as she, grapples with misogyny. To put it very bluntly, any woman that has grown up in South Korea, basically any woman, but specifically in the South Korean context, any woman that has grown up in that country has been fighting misogyny from when they were conceived. And this just means when the parents found out that their children is going to be a woman or a girl, that child has already started fighting misogyny. I enjoyed this book because it reinforces the idea that I have that womanhood is a class, and we always have to remember that we're a collective. So whatever your experience is as a woman in one culture, you would likely find something that is parallel to or even worse in other cultures. And this book just reinforces that for me. Number 5 on my list is Shubeik Lubeik, also called Your Wish is My Command in English, by Deena Mohamed, and it was also translated by the author herself. This book is set in dystopian Egypt where wishes are for literal sale. Like you can buy wishes in a market, like in a can or in a bottle. And wishes also have tiers, so you have very low grade wish and you have very high grade wishes. This book is a graphic novel and it follows 3 characters, Aziza, Noor and Shokri, and they all met in a very small kiosk somewhere in Cairo where 3 high grade wishes were being sold. So because of this, Mohamed gets to touch on many different themes, including women's life under patriarchy, colonialism, classism, the abuse of political power and how it works with classism, poverty, mental health issues, and mental health issues like stigma of mental health issues, how powerful people use religion to deceive and oppress people, and my personal favorite, women using violence to enact their revenge. I don't support violence, but we love a good revenge plot. Number 4 on my list is Ghostroots by Pemi Aguda. I forgot her name for a minute. This is a short story collection as well, and it's set in Nigeria. It contains 12 stories, and the last story in the collection is actually the first work by Pemi Aguda that I read back in 2023, and it's titled Masquerade Season. So each of the stories have a fantastical, weird, magical realism sort of like vibe to them. Almost all of the stories focus on the female experience, but there was one particular one that subverts the reality that we know, where men abandon their kids with their mothers. In this story called Things Boys Do, we see the mothers actually leave the fathers with their kids, and it was socially accepted. The men were scorned for the fact that their wives left them with their kids, and we usually see the reverse in our society, right? And the ending of this story was actually very sweet. It was very tantalizing. So you need to read this collection to know, because I don't want to post a spoiler. My third favorite book of the year, I actually read it in physical copy. This was the only review copy that I got. This was the only book that I actually went out of my way to get in physical copy, and it is called A Mouthful of Salt by Reem Gaafar. I love this book. This book molded me and broke me all at once. It is another debut novel that is set in Sudan and also partly South Sudan. The story opens with the death of a young boy in a small northern village in Sudan along the Nile River. And this opening paves the way to a story that examines how one country came to become two. So how Sudan and South Sudan came to be, whereas they both used to be just Sudan. Major themes include patriarchy, racism, and my personal favorite, how society interacts with superstitions even before they examine the consequences of their own actions or inactions. So this was a really good book. I really enjoyed this book, and I wrote a long review for it, which I would include in the description box. Number 2 on my list is Prophet Song by Lynch. I honestly think 2024 was the year I became a proper booker girl because of the numbers of Booker related books that I read in 2024. This book won the Booker Prize in 2023, and it is set in a dystopian island. I love this book for many reasons, and one of them is the fact that this book features a male writer writing a complex female character. Not many male writers can do that. Even some of your, in fact, not some, most of your favorite male authors would most likely not know how to write complex female characters. Lynch has joined my list of male writers that know how to write complex female characters. He wrote Eilish, the main character of this book. He wrote her very well. You could relate to Eilish, and there were many times that I forgot that the author was actually a man. Another one of my favorite things about this book is that it was inspired by the long Syrian war that inspired a 10-year-long refugee crisis. And that leads me to the last favorite thing that I can think of about this book. It is that this book really said it can always be you. Like, don't ever assume that it will never be me. It can 100% be you. Basically, that's what this book did. I don't want to spoil it, but you need to read it. It's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. So I had to move closer for this one because we are at number 1. My favorite book of the year is called Drinking from Graveyard Wells by Yvette Lisa Ndlovu. I think is how to pronounce her name. And this is also a short story collection. This is actually the first time since I've been tracking my reading that a short story collection makes my favorite book of the year. Drinking from Graveyard Wells is a collection of 14 short stories, and it's also a debut work by Yvette. This is the first time she's publishing a book. All of the stories also have this magical realism slash African realism slash African voodoo vibes. I don't want to call it witchcraft because it's not witchcraft. There's this, if you're African, you know what I'm trying to say, that I just can't find the word to describe. I felt many things while reading this book, and the major feeling that I can pinpoint is the feeling of oneness. I had an heightened sense of Pan-Africanism while reading this book. This book also reminds me of Ghostroots by Pemi Aguda, but it is more overt in how it uses African realism in its stories. I even managed to draw a parallel between one of the stories in Ghostroots and one of the stories in this book. The story in Ghostroots is Bird Woman, and the story here is Plum Tree True Stories. There's a direct parallel that I was able to draw from both stories. Another one of my favorite stories from this collection, which is just pure artistic genius. This is probably my favorite story from this collection, and it is called Becomes a Thing with Thorns. You have to read this collection, or you have to just read this particular story. This collection is really good. I am filming this video in winter and my lighting has just been really bad. Anyway, we have come to the end of this video, and by the way, I read 35 books in 2024. Yes, I intentionally delayed that number till the end of this video. Let me know what some of your favorite books of 2024 were. About 5 of them. It would be really nice. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.